Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Rent Prep for Landlords. I am your host, Eric Worrell, and this is episode 259. We're going to be talking about smart devices, smart locks for your rental properties. The reason that we're going to be talking about this week is there was a recent news article actually popped up on May 7th. I'm reading this off of CNET, but the title is Tenants Win as Settlement Orders Landlords Give Physical Keys Over Smart Locks. So we're going to be getting into that story and what the background of it is and things that you should be thinking about if you're thinking about creating a smart rental apartment. All right, let's get to that right after this.
Welcome to the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast. And now your hosts, Stephen White and Eric Worrell.
So I saw this on the World Wide Webs this week, and this comes from CNET, as I mentioned earlier. The author is Alfred Ng. I don't know how to say that last name. I've seen it before, but I'm not sure how to say it. And as I mentioned, the title is Tenants Win as Settlement Orders Landlords Give Physical Keys Over Smart Locks. Reading through this article a little bit, it said in a settlement released Tuesday, so by the time you hear this, this would be the previous Tuesday, a judge ordered landlords of an apartment building in New York to provide physical keys to any tenants who don't want to use the latch smart locks installed on the building last September. So the interesting thing about this news story out of New York City is that this is the first time, there's no legal precedent or legislation deciding how landlords can use smart home technology. So this is the first time ever that there's anything out there on this subject matter. The interesting thing, though, is that it won't set a legal precedent because it's a settlement, but it does represent a win for tenants who had issues with smart locks and landlords installing them against their will. So the reason that the tenants were upset is they thought that this app that was needed to be used to access the building, that it was tracking their location, and they thought there was privacy concerns. The company that was mentioned earlier, Latch Smart Locks, says that's actually not how it works. We don't share your location data or anything like that. But there was a little bit back and forth, and it turns out the judge sided with the tenants on this one. It's an interesting story in the fact that it's the first one, right? There's always a first, especially with like legal and legislation. It's always sliding behind what's actually happening, because for there to be something of precedent to reference for this, it would have had to have already happened before. And smart locks have only been around for a few years, and this is the first time that it's become an issue. I think it's kind of lean towards it being a little ridiculous, but they do have one story in here. As you read down the article, it talks about a tenant who is 93 who wasn't capable of using a phone and found himself trapped in his home because of the smart locks. My grandmother, rest her soul, I used to get calls from her. We used to get calls from her on the house phone back in the day, and she'd say her printer was broke, and there was this what was it called? Cone King. It was an ice cream place that was around the corner or whatever. And, you'd go over there and there'd be a giant Cone King coupon just lodged in the paper tray or something. Like, it'd always be something ridiculous where you're like, Grandma, like, you've got a Cone King coupon in the printer. Well, I can understand how somebody who's 93 maybe doesn't have the technical savvy to operate a smartphone and to open up their home that way. So in my opinion, it does make sense to at least provide the option. I think when it comes to tenants that are just worried about their privacy, I mean, honestly, your privacy at this point. I've got a Google Home sitting next to me right now. It's funny, as I said that, it just turned on. It's probably listening to everything that's happening right now and knows everything about me somehow. So I think being worried about your landlord really digging into the data of where you are, I don't think that's going to happen with a smart device like this. They're not going to share that data with your landlord anyways. But that's neither here nor there. It's still an interesting article in the fact that it's the first time that this has been addressed. And I thought it would be a nice excuse to talk about smart home devices for your rental properties, because this is something I've thought about. I've flirted around with it with my own home. What I've found, at least from my experience, is there's a certain level of complexity where it's not worth the hassle, but there is a certain level where you're like, wow, that's super convenient and tenants are going to appreciate it. So at my rental property, I know some people are not big on the quick set smart keys. They say that they can be, busted open, forced manually open or something like that. I don't really worry about that. If somebody wants to get into the apartment that bad that they're going to, take crowbars and things of that nature to get in, they're going to get in my opinion. I have the smart key, so it makes for rekeying very easy. But one of the things I love about it is it got a keypad on it, and I forget what version it is. They have all sorts of different ones. It's like 958, 957. But if you go to Home Depot, you see them in the aisle. They got the keypad to get in. The thing that it's great for is lockouts. The number of issues that I've had as far as lockouts has gone down dramatically. It's just not a problem anymore because somebody just has to remember their code to get in. So then they have the option to use their key or the code. But the other benefit of it that I didn't really think of was I had tenants who had problem closing the community door. It's a duplex, and the side door, they would just leave it open, and it would drive me nuts. And I hate to stereotype, a certain age, right? Because you shouldn't do that. But I kind of feel okay doing it because I'm a tail end millennial at 33 years old. But they're younger renters, and the effort of having to close the door and stick a key in and lock it and then leave is just way too much. You can't be bothered with that. I'm sure somebody's going to be coming and going behind me anyways. I'll just leave it open. So the tenants upstairs were rightfully so getting annoyed that they were leaving the door open, the side door to the building. So what I did when I put that quick set key, the smart key on the door, is I removed the functionality for it to even close unless they lock it. So the hinge actually forces the door open a little bit. But now when they pull it shut, all they have to do is just click a button, and it's the little lock icon on the smart key or on the quick set lock, and it just automatically just locks it and it's good to go. And what I found is that a little bit less of effort on their behalf. Now they're locking the door behind them, and maybe that's something on my end where I should have been threatening them with notices and letting them know. But I think that's one of the things that, landlords struggle with, where you're like, oh, like, do I need to explain to this person why they should close and lock their doors? Like, do I explain this to them? And you kind of start feeling like a parent, and that's where you start to feel like you start to lose your sanity a little bit. But sometimes in some situations, there's things you can do to just make it easier so that doesn't become an issue. Remove the ability to even close it. So the handle of that door used to have a locking mechanism on it too, and it had the pin, the cylinder on it that would, actually close the door. I removed that. So that was just a loose handle that all it acted as was a way to open and close the door as far as being able to give you something to grab onto. So then they had to pull the door shut and then just press that lock button. Otherwise, that thing is, swinging wide open because of the way the hinge was set up. And trust me, it just eliminated that issue. So one of the things that we've been working on here at Rent Prep is really trying to work on the business instead of in the business so much. And that's coming out of reading a book at the recommendation of Jen. If you ever watched her on one of the episodes of Ask a Property Manager, she recommended this book called Traction, which we all read, and it's great. And you realize how many times there's little things that you just deal with because you're like, it'll only take me like 2 minutes. It'll only take me 5 minutes. But you deal with those things over and over and over again, and they suck you of your energy. They suck you of your time. And, by the end of the month, the end of the year, you're like, wow, I spent like 15 hours doing that. And if I had just, instead of spending 2 to 5 minutes to address it each time, just spent 15 to 30 minutes to actually come up with a more solid solution and put an end to it, I wouldn't have had that reoccurring thing popping up in my life over and over and over again. And I do believe that some smart devices help you with that. In my home, I have smart light bulbs. I have Google Home. I do have a smart lock on the front door, but it doesn't connect in that way. But I just installed a Ring doorbell. So that's been really handy. I know when people are coming and going now. And if you look into the details as far as a rental property, that's kind of a gray area. Most places say it's fine to have some sort of surveillance on the outside of the property. And having, a Ring doorbell, which costs me $99, and then if you want the monthly package, it's $10, I think. As long as there's an internet connection it can hook up to, you're going to have video footage of everything that's coming and going out of the apartment on the outside of the house. So that's something that if you're going to go that route on a rental property, you probably want to at least check your local laws, your state laws, your city laws, make sure that it's something that you can do. But from my understanding, on the outside of the rental property, surveillance is not an issue. It's when it's in the inside is when you're really interfering with people's privacy. So you never, even if it's on the outside, you don't even want to be able to see into a window. Like it needs to be on the outside only of the property. But for the rental property, of course, the amenities that you put into it are going to attract a certain type of renter. If it's in an area of town that tends to attract young business professionals who are going to get a kick out of, this apartment already came like Wi-Fi ready with Google Home set up in it, and the front door works, they're going to love that. But in the case of this story where they forced a 93-year-old person to have a smart lock on their door that can only be operated from their phone, and they got locked inside of their apartment, not a great feature, right? So I think you need to think of those things too, like what kind of apartment do you have? Where is it located? Are people going to appreciate these kind of features added in, or are they going to find them to be a nuisance? The level of features that you can add to apartment complexes takes it to another level. I mean, I've seen products out there. I think one's called the Water Scrooge, where it will actually let you know when there is a toilet leak. So if you have like 1,000 units, it'll say, hey, unit 982 has a leaky toilet, and that's going to cost you hundreds of dollars a month. And it'll identify that for you through some sort of technology. I'm not exactly sure how it works, but I mean, there's no end to the level of technology that you can outfit an apartment with. But typically for long-term rentals, I think people typically aren't paying for the Wi-Fi and kind of keep it simple. But when you get to the short-term rentals is where I think it can really make a lot of sense, because then in that case, you probably are supplying the Wi-Fi. And then in that case, you can also put in a Ring doorbell. So if somebody comes up, they can ring the doorbell. It opens on your phone. And my parents were babysitting for me this week. We don't have coverage on Mondays, so they're at the house, and I got a little Ring notification on my phone pops up. I can see my dad coming in with a coffee, and I just jokingly hit the call button and start talking to him through the doorbell. So if you have a short-term rental, absolutely, I'd say get the Wi-Fi, get the package, get the Ring doorbell, whatever the doorbell is that you want. Nest has them, a bunch of different options out there, but there's so many ways to make it more convenient for yourself. So just something to think about. If you have any ideas on it, if you guys have found any smart devices that work for your property, hit me up at RentPrep, Eric at rentprep.com. I'd love to hear about it. And then also just consider the legal implications. Right now, there's still no official precedent since this one actually just settled out of court. But this is something that the courts are looking at now and tenants are aware of. And people are more and more concerned about their privacy as we lose more and more of it. But just be aware of it and think about what works for you in your situation. So just one article this week, guys. Just wanted to cover that. And I'll link to the resources in this article. And I believe we also have a nice article on landlord locks. If you're looking at smart locks and different ones to consider, I'll link to that from the podcast as well. All right, guys. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll catch up with you next week.